Hey there everybody, welcome back to the channel. If this is your first time with me, my name is Fox and this is my YouTube channel called Thoughts with Fox. Here I like to discuss political, economic, as well as cultural issues. I've been interested in politics for the past 7 or 8 years, and 2020 was just the year that really brought a lot of people on board. So this is the start of my journey, trying to make an attempt to maybe be another voice that people look towards in terms of whether it's education on politics or they just like to hear different opinions. So on that note, I want to talk today about the First Amendment. Question I have is it worth fighting for? Is it worth preserving today? Should we make changes to it? So if you stick around, you'll learn my position on it rather quickly. But before we get into the First Amendment, I want to talk briefly about this photo right here. All right, you can see I'm in the chamber for Congress, right? The House of Representatives meet here where they draw up the new bills that potentially get passed along to become laws, if they're successful, obviously, in the Senate. But it's a building that's always intrigued me, especially how the State of the Union address will always take place here. And it's just really a building I'd like to potentially visit one day. But with that aside, let's get back into the First Amendment, because that's really why you clicked on this video. So there's different parts of the First Amendment, and really when people think of the First Amendment, the one part that sticks out in their mind, at least when they talk about the First Amendment, is the right to free speech. So I want to talk about that particular part first, and I have a few articles pulled up that are specific to my home state, and we'll talk a little bit about how I think the First Amendment was, kind of trampled on this year. But I want to start off with a quote, and this is something that I heard back when I was in high school. It's maybe something that you've heard yourself. So even if this is your first time hearing it, hopefully it makes a little bit of sense to you. So I'm paraphrasing, but it goes a little like this. I disagree with what you say, but I defend to the death your right to say it. Have you ever heard that before? You see, if you were to have someone on the left and someone on the right, and you were to, I guess, sort of ask them that if they would still believe in that, I'm really not sure what they would say. Because I really do feel that if certain politicians gained power and had their way, that they would actively try and silence people that disagree with them. Maybe somebody writes an article about them that they aren't happy with, right? In the article, it could be true. It could be true, exposing maybe their hypocrisy on a certain issue, or it could be someone breaking down their argument and saying, no, their viewpoint isn't what's best for the country. Here's, I guess, sort of rebuttals. You see, that really gets into some dangerous ground if you give certain people in power too much power. And the reason for that is because, let's just say, I'll give you a little example. Let's say you're somebody that's on the right. There might be somebody that is on the left and you've heard of them. You might disagree with everything that it is they have to say. That you might think that, and it could be true, but they might engage in just, hateful rhetoric, just total slandering, right? They might use their moral high ground and their virtue to try and get one up on you, and it might annoy you to no end. So let's say somebody came into power and said, hey, we're going to silence that person over there. Would you be happy with it? Now, the answer might be, yeah, right? Because at first you're so fired up and you're just like, there's nothing I can do. This person just says all these, hateful things, and what they say I think is so wrong, but I can't do anything to stop them. So again, if you're happy with them losing their freedom of speech, it opens up the door for a politician later on to come into their administration, and they might not agree with what you have to say. And then, before you know it, your First Amendment might be in jeopardy, right? Your First Amendment right to free speech could potentially be in jeopardy because you've opened the door already for someone in political office to say, well, this speech doesn't fall under the Constitution, so no, you can't engage in this type of discussion. So that's as much as it might annoy you, as much as it might enrage you that you have to fight for somebody on the other side, right? Their First Amendment right. unfortunately, it's something that we do, or at least I believe that we all need to do, because if one person loses their freedom of speech, eventually down the road, I think we're all going to lose it. But with speech aside, I want to move on to another big part of the First Amendment, and that's the right to protest. For 2020, to say the least, protesting was a pretty hot topic. And specific to my home state, I have a few articles pulled up, and we're going to kind of just walk through and talk about things just a little bit. So I'm going to make a little switch here, and perfect. So we've made the change. So here's the first article that I have for you regarding, well, the First Amendment and the right to protest. So this is dated back to April 18th of 2020. So it reads, organizer of New Jersey anti-lockdown rally charged with violating the lockdown. Let's read this a little bit. I remember when this first went down. But protesters challenged Governor Phil Murphy's stay-at-home orders, matching similar protests in other states this week. So you might even remember too, when the lockdowns first started, you had a lot of people say, whoa, is the government really allowed to force me to shut my business? Like, that's how I make my earning, right? That's how I earn my wage, by opening up my business or working for a small business. And then the government just basically said, nope, you're not essential. It's time to close. So people were trying to raise that point. And a lot of people that I went to high school with, and I think a lot of people in media, took a moral high ground argument to say, first and foremost, we're not infringing on your rights. Shut up. You're all babies. Just go inside. It's only 15 days to slow the spread, which we already know didn't turn out to just be 15 days. We'll get to that later. But they were, in my opinion, taking the moral high ground and totally dismissing what the other side had to say. And I'm over here, I'm trying to say, guys, we literally just handed the government, specifically in our case, because again, New Jersey is my home state, a silver platter to say, we don't need the First Amendment anymore. We don't need to protest. You're right. There's a virus going on. Please tell us how we have to live our life to make sure we're safe. And unfortunately, not anyone really changed their minds. If people had the opinion saying the lockdowns were good at first, they really didn't change their mind up to this point. They said, no, just stay inside. So here you have somebody trying to peacefully assemble to have their voice heard, and the governor had them charged. Now, full disclaimer, I tried to search and see if the charges were ever dropped or anything like that. I wasn't able to find it. So if by any chance you heard of this story and you know what the end result is, please let me know, because, well, I really would like to know what wind up happening with them. And the reason for that is because I'm going to show you the next article. Okay, so let's make a nice little change. Okay, and here we go. Now we're on to the next article. So this was posted June 8th of 2020, and that's only about a month and a half after the first article, which again, somebody was charged because they violated the New Jersey lockdown orders. So here's this article. Governor Phil Murphy joins in Black Lives Matter protests in New Jersey. And again, June 8th, only about a month and a half after he had said, you're a knucklehead if you want to protest the lockdown. So here you can see he has a tweet. Okay, he says, today in Hillside, we marched for justice, right, for George Floyd. That's obviously the event that sparked the nationwide protests. And I'll stop, take a little time out, and I'll just say, I'm not here to try and say the Black Lives Matter protests were good, or they were bad, or they should or shouldn't have happened. All I'm saying is, if we're going to allow one protest to take place, we have to allow all protests to take place. Because if you open up the door for the government to now say, well, this protest is good, and this other protest over here is no good, well, what good is the First Amendment anymore? And again, kind of going back to what I said about speech, you might be okay with it because you happen to agree with the one side. But again, you give government too much power. Before you know it, a new administration will come into play, and they might silence your speech. They might silence your right to protest. And then what can you really say? Because you didn't fight for the other side in this situation. But with that in mind, Okay, here he is right here, and he's marching, and really in, I'd say, similar fashion to what other people were trying to do a few months prior, assembling outside, trying to say, hey, here are our voices, okay? We have an opinion. Here what it is we have to say. One was shut down, and here, the other's elevated. And again, I'm not trying to say that they shouldn't have been elevated. I'm just simply saying, isn't that hypocritical for the governor to say, if you want to protest the lockdown, that's bad. But if you want to protest for Black Lives Matter, that's good. No, everything should be equal. All protests should be equal. That's at least my opinion. You can let me know if you disagree with me for whatever reason, and please lay it out. I do want to know. You know, maybe I'm missing something, okay? But again, you silence one, but not the other. Man, this in particular from Governor Murphy really did kind of tick me off, because, you know, here you have businesses and small businesses closing left and right, and them being told to shut up and just, you know, stay inside, and then but everyone else gets to go outside. You know, that's something that I wasn't cool with. But so that's regarding protesting, and in regards to religious gatherings and press, they really follow the exact same ideas regarding speech and protesting. In that, do you really want the government to have the power to tell you that you can or can't, you know, peacefully gather in a religious setting? Or just think about this. Say somebody has an article that goes through, you know, maybe whoever's in power, right? Whoever's running the government, maybe they have an article speaking out against them, saying, hey, their talking points or their views on how we can make the world a better place, I don't think it's the best. Here's a rebuttal. Do you really want the government to have the power to silence them? Because again, all it takes is just a little revolution, and somebody that's in power that disagrees with you, well, now you open up the door for them. And I always say, if you let the government in the door, they're not just going to turn around and walk out of your house. It's very hard to get them out once you already let them in. But for the last part, I want to transition back to our Chamber of Congress. There it is, and we're back. We're back in the House of Representatives, that is. So when it comes to Assembly, obviously you have the holidays coming up. Thanksgiving already passed. I know Hanukkah, I think, just started this past Friday, and Christmas is coming up, as well as the New Year. So I'm sure in other states you have people in whether it's they're a governor or, you know, maybe they're a state legislator, whatever it is, they're saying, hey, we're urging you, you know, you shouldn't go out, you know. I'm sure you've already heard. And again, all I ask is, do you really want those people in power to have rule of law over you? Because we can show, or I can show, all examples of the same governors violating their own orders. Right? So it's like, rules for thee, but not for me. And that's something I'm not down with. And I hope it's something that, you know, you're not cool with either. Because again, now that you're making as if it's like a ruling class and we're all down here, and if you try and speak out against those at the top, they're going to silence you. So that's why I think the First Amendment still has a huge role in our society. That's why I think it's something that's still worth fighting for to this day. But whether you agree or disagree, I want you to let me know what you thought. And if this was your first time checking out a video, I hope you'll come back again another time. I try and put out a video each and every day, and I want to start putting out videos on all different topics. So hopefully we can build a nice little community of people with really just exchange of ideas. I'm trying to make it to where free thought is encouraged. That's okay. That's healthy. That's how we can all grow together. But what I'm also going to do, and I'll include it in the description of the video, I just made an Instagram that's going to be pretty much directly linked with this YouTube channel. So if you want to follow that, and if maybe you want to share this video with a buddy of yours, I'll make sure I post the videos to that Instagram account, and that way you can just share it a little bit easier. But I'll leave you with this. If you remember back in March, we were told 15 days to slow the spread. At the time of the video, December 12th, 2020. We're about 8 or 9 months in. So I want you to, with that in mind, think about maybe the next time you hand over the power to the federal government.